So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's regulatory webinar brought to you by the European Medicines Agency and EATRIS, that is the European Research Infrastructure for Translational Medicine. We are privileged to have the EMA join us today for what is our third joint webinar titled Support for Academic and Non-Profit ATMP Developers. Next slide. For those that don't know EATRIS, it is a research infrastructure for translational medicine, which has a core mission to provide facilities, resources, and services to support cutting-edge research. We are comprised today of over 144 research institutions across 14 countries, and we operate across 5 platforms, which includes ATMPs, biomarkers, imaging and tracing, and vaccines and immune monitoring. Next slide. So it is advanced therapies that drives today's webinar as we aim to learn more about the complexities and challenges in their development path, which includes cell and gene therapies and tissue engineered products. But with great promise of these products comes great complexity. So central to EATRIS's mission is to provide education and training in all aspects of ATP development. And this includes, of course, the regulatory aspects to help get these innovative must-have products to the patients that need them. Next slide. So what does EATRIS do? Well, we use the expertise of our centres across Europe to provide user access to research and expert services. We help develop new research tools, provide education and training, and overall work to improve the conditions of translation. Next slide. So it is in the spirit of educating the next generation of ATMP scientists that EATRIS is coordinating the ADVANCE programme. So what is ADVANCE? Well, ADVANCE is an EU-funded training project that offers a 3-stage learning program to support early career biomedical scientists. This includes developing currently missing scientific knowledge, transversal skills, and competences to meet the key challenge areas that exist in the ATMP development cycle. We have divided this program into 4 cross-cutting pillars, and this includes the scientific challenges, manufacturing, regulatory implications, and commercialization. The program offers webinars, a self-paced online course, and 5-day intensive workshops on a yearly basis. Next slide. Of note is the regulatory online module that now consists of 4 of these modules, which are developed solely by the EMA. And we strongly encourage you to look at this very informative and useful content. This includes presentations on how to apply for ATMP classification, the environmental risk assessment for ATMPs, including a GMO. There's lectures there on scientific advice and ATMP certification, all there for your benefit. The EMA webinars that I mentioned are also all available online, and we really encourage you to look at this great content. I have to say, on behalf of EATRIS and the ADVANCE team, I would like to say we are very grateful to the EMA for their continuing support to this program and similar initiatives as they try and educate all of us on the complexities of regulatory science and keep us informed of how these useful initiatives can support the ATP developer in trying to translate their products to the patient, in particular the academic developer. Next slide. The ADVANCE team is made up of EATRIS, who coordinates it, Elevate, University of Ljubljana, the Institute for Interdisciplinary Innovation in Healthcare, TACIS Biotech in Rome, Institute of Superior Sanità in Rome, and KU Leuven. Next slide. So now to get started, firstly, please note the session is being recorded. So by remaining in the meeting, you are consenting to that. Next slide. Please type your questions in the Q&A box anytime during the talk. The EMA team are going to select questions during the Q&A session. And of course, afterwards, if there's any follow-up queries or questions about the webinar, please email us at advance@eatris.eu. Next slide. So to find out more about ADVANCE, please follow all these links on the slide, as we hope you have a look at the online course that I just mentioned, including that very important regulatory module supplied and provided by the EMA, and try and work your way through the whole course if, in fact, you are brave enough. Next slide. So it is my pleasure now to introduce today's speaker from the European Medicines Agency, Dr. Patrick Celis. So Patrick joined the EMA in 1997. He holds a degree in pharmacy and a PhD in pharmaceutical sciences from the University of Leuven in Belgium. He is lead scientific officer in EMA's Advanced Therapies Office and scientific lead to the Committee for Advanced Therapies, the CAT. Patrick has held previous positions in the EMA, including the coordination of EU authorization procedures for biological and biotech products, He was responsible for the following scientific projects, including pandemic influenza vaccines, TSC, biosafety of recombinant products and cell-based medicinal products. He has also held positions of Scientific Secretary of the Vaccine Working Party and the Cell-Based Products Working Party. Since 2006, he has been involved in the implementation of the Regulation on Advanced Therapy Medicinal Products at the EMA. Prior to joining the EMA, Patrick worked as a pharmaceutical assessor at the Belgian Ministry of Health. So, Patrick, the floor is now yours. Thank you.
Okay, many thanks, David, for the introduction. I feel a bit old when this is being read out, but I'm afraid it is what it is. Okay, so welcome everyone. Let me try to share my screen. Yeah, I hope you can all see. I have a short presentation lined up for you where I want to address 2 points. It's first one is the type of engagement that the European Medicines Agency, EMA, has with academic developers. And then a couple of slides in the second part on the pilot that we have just initiated to support academic ATMP development. So let's start first with our engagement with academia. So academic research is known and acknowledged that is the origin of many medicines, and especially in the ATMP field, this is fully true. The need to accelerate translation of academic research in the to the clinic, to the patient, is of course the final goal. And that is what was at the basis of the framework for collaboration with academia that has been in place since 2017. Of course, before 2017, we had already interactions with academia. It's not that this was novel in the last 5 years. And then we were having interactions on innovative project via interactions via meetings with Innovation Task Force and also via scientific advice. Now, what does this framework entails? So the first objective was, or the first aim was, to raise awareness of what the European Medicines Agency and the European Medicines Network, including the National Medicines Agency, means. Then it is second objective to promote and further develop regulatory support to translate academic research into new methodologies and medicines. Third is to ensure that we have also access to your very specific scientific expertise and research, and that we can make use of your expertise also in the generation of evidence, in the development of guidelines, and so on. And the last is to collaborate with the regulatory network, for you to be able to collaborate with the regulatory network on research on regulatory science, for example, novel approaches, endpoints, and methodologies. Okay, so practically, what does that engagement with academia offers? So first, there is a dedicated entry point for any questions or any issues you as an academic developer has. So the email address is here, and the colleagues behind this email address will then make sure that the right persons within the European Medicines Agency will be able to support you. We have a process in place to seek input from healthcare professionals, which include, of course, the academics and the patients in the authorization and supervision of medicines. And this goes pretty broad. So this is involvement of experts in committee work, in the work of working parties, but also in scientific advisory groups, but also involvement of these professionals in guideline development, for example, in defining regulatory science needs. But there's also the possibility of visiting experts or seconded national experts from academia to the EMA. A financial incentive is there for protocol assistance for academic organizations developing orphan medicines. So this is scientific advice for orphan products developed by academia. And work is ongoing to broaden these financial incentives to bring it in line with what is available to small and medium-sized enterprises. And then we have two programs, pilot programs ongoing to support academic development. This is repurposing and advanced therapies. For advanced therapies, you will hear a bit more. Repurposing is about identification of existing medicines for new therapeutic uses, for indications outside the authorized indication. And it's a way of making new treatment options available to patients. Now, this scheme summarizes support tools that are available to academic developers, and I will not address everything. So I already mentioned the academic entry point. What I will present in the next couple of slides is how to interact with the Innovation Task Force, the ITF. A bit of insight on scientific advice and protocol assistance, the PRIME scheme, and then the ATMP specific support mechanisms. So let's start with ITF, Innovation Task Force. So this is a forum for early interactions with developers of innovative medicines. It's not restricted to academia, and that you can see here at the right side, where you see the split of ITF meetings in the last 5 years, depending on the type of developer, and academia is well presented, I can see. What ITF is a multidisciplinary group that includes experts both from the European Medicines Agency, but also from its committees and its working parties. And the aim of the briefing meetings is to have a dialogue on the innovative aspects of medicines development, and that is broad, its scientific, regulatory, and legal aspects. Scientific advice is a procedure where you can ask questions related to the quality, non-clinical, and the clinical development of your product, but equally on how to generate evidence post-authorization, so post-approval. What it will give you is some scientific certainty of your product development. You can ask it at any point during development, and I want to stress this one. Early advice is certainly what I would say is necessary for ATMPs, then with subsequent follow-up advice. And it's very important because we have seen that quality development of an ATMP is critical towards a smooth development and clinical trials with your product. So protocol assistance is what we call scientific advice for a designated orphan product. And here I already mentioned that there is a fee waiver for academia. There's a couple of special types of scientific advice. One is on biomarkers and methodologies, we call the qualification procedure. But we also have the possibility of having scientific advice jointly and in parallel with health technology assessment bodies. These are the scientific bodies that look at your product and the potential cost benefit of your profile of your product after approval. And then also on parallel scientific advice with the FDA. A PRIME scheme is a support mechanism that is in place since 2016 for new medicines that have the potential of addressing an unmet medical need. As you can see in the graph, it's a lot of SMEs that are applying for prime eligibility. Academic centers are not so well represented yet. Now, there is an early entry point in the process for both small and medium-sized enterprises and academics. So this is at the time point of a proof of principle. So this is the non-clinical demonstration. But this is not so easy to use neither for SMEs or academia, because it's often you need some promising clinical data to demonstrate the potential to address the unmet medical need. So many products are for orphan diseases and for ATMPs. Just to flag this a little bit, that about half of the products that are in the prime scheme are ATMPs. Now, what will the additional support mean? So you will have an earlier appointment of a CHMP, or in case of ATMPs, a CAT rapporteur. There will be an EMA contact point for you. A kickoff meeting will take place where we involve multidisciplinary expertise, not only from EMA, but also from the EU network, including the appointed rapporteur. Scientific advice will be used and we will support you at key points in the development. And if you are successful and are submitting a product for authorization, for marketing authorization at the end, there is a possibility for an accelerated assessment. The next two slides are on the ATMP classification and the ATMP certification procedure. The classification procedure is a possibility to consult the EMA on the question whether or not your product is or is not an ATMP. It gives you then regulatory certainty. You will know what legal framework to follow and what guidelines are available for you. We involve here the Committee for Advanced Therapies, the CAT, who will deliver the scientific recommendation on classification. And just to let you know, we have quite a lot of experience with this procedure. Over or almost 600 classifications have been finalized so far. A summary of the scientific recommendation is published after removal of any confidential information. And I forgot to say that the classification procedure is also free of charge. Certification procedure, I add here more for completeness. It is open for academic spin-offs that are registered as SMEs. And if an SME can ask the agency to look at data on the quality development and the non-clinical development that have been generated with their ATMP. And then there will be an independent evaluation by the CAT, and you will get some insight in how far the development you have done so far is or is not on track for future marketing authorization. The time point to ask for this, you can ask at any stage, but it's best that your product has more or less completed the non-clinical development, so is in early clinical development, because then your quality and your non-clinical package will be as complete as possible at that stage of the development. So here, this is just to recap when to ask what type of support. For early research, then interactions with Innovation Task Force and ATMP classifications are first steps. Once your process moves on to the non-clinical and the clinical development, then I would advise to look into the possibilities for seeking scientific advice and prime following on. So this brings me to the second part of my presentation, and this is on the academic pilot. And most of you probably have seen this announcement on the EMA website at the end of September. Now, there was quite a lot of interest in this one, and there's probably still is. Over 30, I think between 30 and 40 academic developers asked for additional information to us on this procedure. Now, I have to say that we are still working on the practicalities of the procedure. So what are the criteria for selection? What is the documentation that you will need to be provided? So we sent a holding reply, hopefully to all of them, and we hope to get back to you before the end of December. Now, why are we doing this pilot? So, like I already said, academic developers are the key source of ideas and basic research for product developments, and then especially for ATMPs. But the translation of these ATMPs into clinics is low or slow. It's depending on how you see it. So that's why this pilot is there. Two aims is to increase the level of translation into patients in Europe, but also for us to have a better understanding what type of support you need and how we can best interact with you to move on your basic research, your early development work on ATMPs into a product for the clinical use. We will focus the regulatory support within our existing framework. So we will use existing tools and processes like Innovation Task Force, Scientific Advice, and PRIMES. And the pilot will be limited to 5 academic products that we will follow and for as long as needed, but our pilot is for 3 years, and then we see how to take it further. The aim is to nurture good manufacturing and clinical development. So we will make sure that the quality is in place from the start. And we will set up a close collaboration with you. We will agree a regulatory development plan with time points for review of the progress or assessment of maturity. But there will also be an agreement on when to come for scientific advice. What are the milestones when we will support you to get scientific advice input. But there might be also stopping points when we say that either your product is not moving on or your product is, and we stop then the pilot support. Also, a stopping point might be when you decide that the product would be, or you would join forces with a pharmaceutical company, or it might be that the product moved on far enough and that we advise you to go for marketing authorization. We will try to be as holistic as possible. So if there are, for example, in vitro diagnostics that are used that are required for the appropriate use of the ATMP, we'll also take that into account and support you in all the interactions you have there. And where is possible, we will also smooth with additional tools we have. For example, using Darwin for identifying registries for post-authorization studies, or for setting up a natural history study for contextualizing your clinical data. So the practical information, like I said in the very beginning, we're still working on it. We will communicate that very soon, I hope. We will select 5 candidates. We will look at, of course, ATMPs only and at academic non-profit developers. We will ask you to provide information how this product that you are developing would address an unmet medical need. And we will ask you for data for us to judge on the maturity of your development. And that will be then both on the quality and manufacturing development and what promising non-clinical and clinical data you have. And I think with this one, I conclude the talk, and now we will open the floor for any comments or questions.
See whether there are any online, but there are a few questions in the Q&A. So I wanted to bring them to your attention, Patrick. So one is, at which stage of development of ATMP is HTA available and adequate?
Okay, so that's a question that is certainly not specific to academic developers. So that is the situation for any ATMP developer. Now, just to set the scene, product need first to be developed for getting a marketing authorization. And the type of information that we will be looking at is if your clinical data show that the benefit risk profile is positive, so that the efficacy efficacy is greater than any of the safety signals. That will result then in the marketing authorization. Now, the HTA bodies will look how to position the product in the medicines armamentarium for treating a certain disease. So they will look if this product has an added benefit towards the other treatment options for a certain indication. And for that one, they will look at the benefit versus the cost of the product. And sometimes the data, the clinical data that are needed for demonstration of benefit risk for getting a marketing authorization are not aligned to the data that the health technology assessment bodies want to have to demonstrate the cost benefit. So therefore, early interactions at the time point, I would say, of the setting up and the development of your pivotal clinical trials between the regulator, European Medicines Agency, and the HTA bodies is appropriate, because that would allow for the clinical development to address both needs, and that would then smoothen the interactions and the discussions that you have after an ATMP or a medicinal product in general has been approved.
Thank you. Maybe I mentioned there are quite a few on clarification around when the procedure, the template for applying to the pilot will be available. So maybe if you can just summarize where we are and what we are hoping to target.
Yeah, so I already mentioned that briefly during the presentation. So after we have put out the press announcement at the end of September, we started working and trying to identify what is the minimum set of data that we need to make a pre-selection of the products that would be suitable for the academic pilot. We want to do it in a two-way or two stages. First, we do a high-level checking on basis of data you provide, where you demonstrate unmet medical need and maturity of your development, on top, of course, of some data, some information on your academic or non-profit status. And then the short list of products, we will then invite for a meeting with ITF, where we have a direct interaction. And at that second step, we will then identify the candidates in the pilot. The aim is to get an announcement to everyone who approached us so far before the end of the year with a type of application form, a preset template, and we will give you then a couple of months to complete that, and probably at the end of the first quarter of 2023, we will be then starting the selection process as I described.
Thank you. And we had a couple of that. So hopefully that addressed your question, but let us know if we didn't. There is one question on, the first one is also a very general one, I think more on scientific advice. What kind of advice can be given about biomarkers and methodology? Is it about production, clinical testing? And lack of standard is one of the difficulties we find, molecule standards and methodological standards. Do you want to take that one? But again, it's a very
it's a very detailed one. Perhaps I had another question on scientific advice, and that might be how perhaps I can start with that one. Mm-hmm. The question was, when is it too early for interactions with ITF? And when is it too early to come for scientific advice? Now, I just want to say it's never too early for ITF, for interaction with Innovation Task Force. Now, of course, there is limited capacity within the EMA and within the member states experts time. So there is some prioritization. So we will look at developments that are advanced a little bit beyond the initial concept. And we will also look if the development is indeed innovative. So it's not too early, but it might be that we refer you to either existing guidelines or other sources of information, or if your product has advanced too far, we might refer you directly to scientific advice. Now, when it is too early for scientific advice, probably the answer is it's never too early. And I think I want to mention this, that it's better to come early and come back with follow-up scientific advices than wait and initiate, for example, your clinical development with still uncertainties in your quality development, because then you risk that you put into question some of your non-clinical data or your clinical data just because your, for example, your manufacturing process or your product characterization is not considered sufficient. Now, the question that was asked on using the scientific advice for methodologies, new diagnostic tools, and so on, that is also possible. It's we call it qualification procedure. The principles are pretty similar. So you put your proposal forward, which is then discussed by experts that are linked to the scientific advice working party. Only the outcomes might be different because we will then provide an advice that, if I'm correct, Caroline, will be also made public to a certain extent.
That's correct. And on the biomarker specifically, indeed, the scientific advice working party also can advise on whether selected biomarker might be relevant, I guess, in terms of development of a program and what evidence would need to be generated. So it would usually be more in relation to clinical trials. And there is also, if you are looking into developing a program in relation to a biomarker, for instance, in terms of indication, then it might also be relevant to look at the template for the assessment report for for a centralized application because it does include some tips around areas where the Committee on Advanced Therapy and the human medicinal products will look whenever they will assess a marketing application. A couple of questions on candidates. So I have two. One is it possible to get into the program or into the pilot, I guess, if already in phase 1? And then what type of manufacturing quality aspects we are looking for selection into the pilot? And I guess, as Patrick explained, we've started to look into that in terms of a selection criteria. But I would say we had some already some discussion on manufacturing aspects, and we expect to see some kind of already a manufacturing process described, I guess, at high level.
This is indeed correct. I think I had an add-on question on that, is that what are the most common mistakes that academics are making in ATMP development? And what are the easy avoidable pitfalls for in your opinion? So here on common mistakes for academics, I have to say we don't have any specific data on academic developers of ATMPs. What we have done, though, is we looked at, we did an analysis of challenges during ATMP development by all types of developers. So we didn't split it on small or big pharma or academics. And for that one, we looked at major issues identified during the authorization process, but also on main areas that for which advice was asked in a scientific advice procedure. And here we split it in quality. The main issues are how to produce a gene or a cell-based product in a consistent manner, and also how to deal with changes in the manufacturing process during development, so the comparability. The non-clinical part is how can we get relevant data generated in non-clinical models, so not only animal models, but also in vitro models, and how can we link or identify a dose for clinical trial from these non-clinical models. And clinical there, the issue is how to get convincing non-clinical trial results, because ATMPs often are for small populations, so you end up with small trials, for which randomization is not always possible. We expect as a regulator to have some idea on a long-term effect. So remains a product efficacious after 5 years, 10 years? And linked to that is how to set up post-authorization studies and use registry studies. Now, this is, of course, not academic developer specific, but the challenges for an academic developer may even be greater, because you might not be so well aware of the regulatory expectations that we have. So that's why early scientific advice, I just want to repeat that, is important. We don't want you to make shortcuts, for example, in the quality development, that at the end will delay the approval of either a clinical trial or later on marketing authorization.
Thank you, Patrick. Just to continue on some questions on a pilot. So there is a question, any idea for a further pilot authorizing collaboration with for-profit SME biotech? At the moment, this is not proposed. We have, as Patrick explained, support. We provide support to SMEs, and then this one is specifically dedicated to academic developers. There is a question as well as whether if an academic developer had already generated randomized evidence of efficacy for an ATMP, would that be an appropriate scheme to enter in terms of a pilot at this late stage of development?
I can take that one. It's certainly not excluded, so it might be even a shortcut, but I think it's best that if you are in a situation that you have more or less already completed your clinical development, check with us, because then it might be that you are not really in need anymore of this additional support, and we can directly guide you to the next step into a marketing authorization. But certainly I would say apply, submit your data, and then we will look at this individual situation and decide if this is something that is ideal for the pilot. Take into account that the pilot is not only for you, to support you, but also for us to learn how we can best support you. And if all of the products that we would be allowing in the pilot are late stage, then we miss also a bit of the learning possibility from our side.
Thank you. And then on the opposite side, I guess, someone was asking, Blanca was asking, could it be possible to present a product that has no results from clinical trials yet? For example, with a first-in-human clinical trial ongoing at the moment?
I think it's probably the appropriate time point. So we most likely, looking at what we expect for a prime submission is that there is some data, clinical data, that give a hint on the potential of the product to address an unmet medical need. So as soon as you have some very early clinical results showing that the product in the indication you are investigating has beneficial effects in the patient, that would be an appropriate stage to enter into the pilot or to submit an application for entering into the pilot.
Another one on pilot qualification, I guess. If a sponsor is a non-profit organization, but a consortium includes company, will the project still be eligible as a potential pilot project?
Most likely, yes. So we will do a selection on the academic non-profit status, and it will all depend in how far this consortium is funded by public money or by private money. If this consortium is set up where the input from the industry, the profit partner, is in kind, so regulatory advice, that type of activity, that would be acceptable. If, of course, there is a financial input, that might be excluding you, and that will be one of the criteria that we will be looking when checking the non-profit or the academic status of the applicant.
Right, and last one, I guess, on the pilot specifically, since the academic compounds will be available to address an unmet medical need or intended to address an unmet medical need, in case a commercial ATMP is already authorized for the same indication, could an academic be candidate as well for this pilot?
Potentially, yes. It's a difficult one to answer, and we will have to look at that case by case. But I would certainly say that even if this is for an indication for which there is already a product, don't be shy and submit your initial request for entry into the pilot, and then we can look at that specific case.
Thank you. Right, so there is just a point of clarification. Is the scientific advice also for free? So I guess it's under the pilot.
It's under discussion, I would say. We have it clarified and established that it is scientific advice for orphan designated products is free. We're looking in what can be done for academic, for scientific advice for products that are not yet designated as orphan medicines. So this is one of the aspects we're looking at. We are doing this not only for the pilot, we are looking this more generally for any academics that are approaching us for scientific advice. Can't promise anything yet, but that is a work in progress.
An interesting one. For academics, it's quite a challenge to develop a proper investigator brochure or an IMPD, so an investigational medicinal product dossier. It would be very helpful if EMA can request companies to make an IMPD available for education and training purposes. Perhaps ATMPs on which development as was terminated could be made available. Can EMA help to bring this question to companies? I guess we could take that as a suggestion for further training, or I don't know. I mean, there are some templates available, but indeed that's a good suggestion, and we certainly can take note of this one. Question on: can academic group based in Switzerland eligible for the pilot program?
If the group is solely based in Switzerland or UK, probably not. If it's a consortium including European academic centers, then we can look into that, and then that might be a way to include also Swiss or UK centers. But like I said, this is something still as one of the criteria we're looking into.
Then there are a couple of probably a bit less related questions. Would you advise the use of the adaptive pathway for ATMPs? And I guess I'm not sure. I know there was this proposal a while back, but I don't think there's much happening.
No, it is a pilot that we investigated on for ATMPs and other products that then resulted in the more structured interaction on the joint HTA scientific advice. So this adaptive pathways pilot was more or less closed 4 or 5 years ago.
And the next one, are efficacy data in rodents or animal models considered mandatory to seek approval? What if no suited efficacy models are available? Can this be substituted by iPSC or organic models?
Oh, yes. The short answer is yes. So if, and you can see that also in the guidelines that we publish, is that we will not ask for animal data if we are aware in advance that this will not generate any data that are relevant. If it can be replaced by an in vitro model, organoid cell culture model showing results that would be equally appropriate for ATMP development. Now, this is one of the typical questions for scientific advice, where you put forward what you consider as the most appropriate non-clinical development of your product, where you make then the proposal of replacing any animal studies by non-animal models. And that is then looked in, and like said, the goal is to reduce to the maximum the use of animals for non-clinical testing.
And we have, I think we answered all of the questions either in writing or live.
Okay. So, listen, thank you so much, Patrick and Caroline, for this extremely informative overview of these useful EMA tools and opportunities to support the academic ATP developer. It really is a fantastic initiative, and we're very appreciative of it. So to close out this great session, I would like to thank again our colleagues from the EMA for taking time out of their very busy schedules to teach us all about the critical support that is now available and provided by the EMA to support the academic and non-profit ATMP developer. We hope you have found today's webinar informative and useful moving forward in your own ATMP development programs. I'd also like to thank my co-host and program manager of Advanced, Elise Kadung, and Laurent, and all the Advanced team. And finally, you, thank you for joining us all today. We hope you found this latest Advanced webinar useful and informative, and we hope that you all check out the Advanced course, in particular, that very, very informative regulatory module. So thanks again, and we'll see you all soon at one of our next EATRIS education training initiatives. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.